Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberley, Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and I'm here with...
Lois, Vallely.
Yeah.
Executive Vice President.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I had to just think of it then.
I didn't realize we were giving ourselves amazing job titles. I would have called myself VP of
That's
productions.
a joke. I'm chief reporter. I nearly said chief executive.
You are our chief executive. You lead us in everything you do. But yeah, today I thought it would be cool for us to have a sit down conversation, just the two of us, because clearly we're the best in the team.
Obviously.
Yeah. And I wanted to cover a bunch of different things, but I thought we could hop in first with consumer duty.
Oh, yes. Big one.
We are coming close to the first year anniversary of it. And I know during the time when it was going to be implemented, a lot of people had different thoughts. There was no people who were in the middle, I think.
Yeah, it was quite divisive. Although I think most people seem to agree that it's a good thing, but a lot of, especially smaller financial advice firms, especially sort of one-man, two-man bands, think it's a waste of time for them because they're already doing everything that the FCA suggests for the consumer duty, which I get. But I think it's more about evidencing that you're providing value for consumers.
Yeah. I did have a thought about this, you put out a poll and it is Mental Health Awareness Week, and the poll results, you can talk more about those because I think you know more. But there was quite a large contingent that were like, oh, I'm thinking of leaving the profession because of regulation, not just consumer duty, but just how much more stringent regulation has become. But I wonder if there's an element of that's like, when you first started out as a journalist, there was certain ways you were doing things, right?
Yeah.
And now we're moving into the age where a lot more emphasis is being put on digital. And if you were so used to the old, writing and putting out news stories, and then you had to transfer over to doing online content, which was fine, but you were kind of still doing the same stuff that you'd learned. And then also having to now think about catering to different platforms, that might make some people who are old school, quote unquote, journalists feel like, oh, I want to leave the profession. So that was a really long-winded way for me to. I was trying to connect the two in a way that I could relate to, you could relate to. But I feel like maybe some of those people who are saying that, is that coming from a place of no, back in my day, it was so much easier. There wasn't as many things to fill out. Whereas if I was coming in as a financial advisor now, I'm only learning this way. So I know each step I have to do this. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are.
That is exactly a point I spoke to a couple of people for a cover feature we wrote for May all about advisor mental health. And it was about regulation, but it was about other things that are affecting advisors' mental health as well. So regulation was a big one for, as you say, sort of more established advisors who've been through RDR in 2012, think maybe the consumer duty is just a sort of RDR all over again. They don't want to go through it all again. There's all these changes. They have to be aware of all this compliance stuff they have to do, which, as you say, if you're just coming in, that's just what you do and what you're used to. But if you're just coming in and you're a new advisor, you're maybe not prepared for some of the sort of more in-depth conversations you have to have with clients, because as someone pointed out to me, you might know more than your client's spouse knows, or your client's family knows, or your client's close friends know, and it gets quite sort of intense for advisors, I think. And maybe that doesn't seem to be in any training material, just quite how in-depth your conversations might go.
Yeah. There was an element, I think I recently also did a podcast where I was talking to someone and I was like, it's starting to sound a little bit like advisors might also need to have a counselor certificate on the side, because there is that line being blurred of how involved you're getting into. But I guess money is just tied up in so much of our lives
and emotional topic. So yeah, it sometimes does stray into sort of almost giving therapy. So yes, some advisors do have financial coaching or actual therapy training. Obviously you don't have to. I think so. I spoke to Chris Budd, who we speak to quite often. He's a friend of money marketing. He's all very into financial well-being and things like that. And he said, the best thing to do if you're an advisor and you haven't got any therapy or coaching training and you feel the conversation is getting a little bit too close to therapy or counselling, then you should signpost the client to someone who can help. So certainly either get to know some therapists or have a list of, people that the client can then go and talk to about more life issues if you feel it's getting a bit too personal.
I would probably be like, hey, I have a friend I can recommend. We'll talk about money and then this person can help you figure out the emotional aspect of it. Because I think therapists already have to learn how to like compartmentalize and detach. But if you're also working with this person regularly when it comes to their money, I don't know, it might be a bit much. So I know that we did a poll a while ago. And I do have the results for this. So the poll was, has the consumer duty been a worthwhile exercise? And 47% said, no, it was a waste of time. Was that surprising for you when we put that poll out?
No, because I know that I don't like
the audience.
But I know the people who probably answered that poll. So no, it wasn't a surprise. As we were saying before, I think that's probably, I don't like to categorize people, but it's, as a generalization, it's probably advisors who are a bit older, approaching retirement, as I said, have been through RDR already, don't really feel like, they're already doing all this stuff. They're already, as somebody said in a comment, I can't remember who it was, what does the FCA think we've been doing all this time? Because they are, especially the smaller firms, probably are already doing everything they should be for their clients, providing value for money, because lots of advisors say to me, their clients are so close, they're like friends. So you wouldn't want to screw your friends over, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit surprised that, what was the percentage of people who said
it was a good thing for
some? Only needed for some.
Oh, the one, but it wasn't needed for all firms. That was 23%.
I would have thought that would be higher. Because I feel like these, advisors who don't feel they really needed it because they're just a one-man band, they're already doing everything for their clients. I would have thought they would still think that some of the larger firms and certainly some of the providers probably needed the consumer duty.
Yeah, because they have complaints for those providers as well. So I think when they were filling out, they were probably just thinking more from their personal point of view and their own personal frustrations. Yeah. Which is fair. But I
can see why, if you become an advisor, the thing you want to do is to advise clients and build relationships with clients. You don't want to be spending loads of time filling out regulatory forms. So I see it from their perspective. I do also, however, see it from the regulator's perspective. Obviously, advice firms isn't the only thing that the consumer duty covers. We were talking off mic about how it covers, all insurers as well. Yeah. And lots of larger firms, banks, retail banks, everything. Every financial services firm, basically. So the FCA didn't write the entire thing with just advice firms in mind. Right. And I think sometimes advisors maybe forget that a little bit, or they think that there should have been. I have heard, some say, well, they should have divided it up more and made it more, tailored to each type of, or to each faction of financial services.
I guess that is true, that it can't be for like as vast as financial services is. You can't just, it does feel a bit weird to have a kind of a one size fits all mandate. Yeah. So maybe it is like they should have like section 3B is for financial advisors, but for them, they're probably like, that's a lot of work for us.
It's a lot of work. They'd have to probably recruit a lot more people, and then they'd get complaints about how many people they were paying. So,
I mean, I get it from like all perspectives. I think it's just a really difficult thing to cater to, because at the same time, when something does go wrong, or some financial services firm does screw over a client, then people are like, where was the FCA?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they have to seem to be doing something. But I think most of the time it's like they're playing defense as opposed to being on offense. Yeah. They're always like catching up, because like right now people are like, hey, we have like these finfluencers over here spreading misinformation. Can you do something about this?
And we have these big tech firms maybe like hovering on the edge of financial services. They might want to come in. So could you like keep an eye on them?
Yeah. But they'll be like, yeah, no, sorry, we're still making sure Consumer Duty works. So we'll deal with that in like 2026.
When we've moved on to the next thing, and AI influencers are coming in, and AI advisors. Sorry, that's what I meant.
But AI influencers could be a thing. All you have to do is get an AI face, and then do the AI voice, and you've got an AI advisor.
Well, when I was writing about food and drink, I wrote about AI influencers and how they're helping, or some food retailers are using AI influencers to sell stuff to people. And I won't go into the detail because it was about food and drink, but it's a bit scary.
It is.
These influencers have way more influence than I have, and they don't even exist.
And some people don't know, especially sometimes on other social sites where maybe a certain demographic of people are on it, such as Facebook. They're more prone to fall for AI clips. And I think not all social platforms have the kind of disclaimer at the bottom of some of these things. Like I've seen on TikTok, I also work with our Future Financial Advisor brand. So whenever I put out information kind of promoting financial advice as a profession to second careerists or younger people, I'll provide information in the posts and stuff like that. And there's always a disclaimer that TikTok automatically puts at the bottom of my thing, being like, for proper financial advice. I'm not even saying anything necessarily like giving financial advice, but I think because I say the words finance and advice, it gets flagged on TikTok. So those websites are good at, not all posts, but they're good at putting like a disclaimer, like be careful, don't, listen to this completely, do your own research. But I don't think that's a thing with Facebook. I think that was the big issue with Facebook, like in the 2016 election and stuff like that, with misinformation and whatever. But who knows when they'll catch up to that. So is there anything else you wanted to touch on Consumer Duty a year on?
Just that I think it's all about, so I agree. Well, I don't know because I'm not in these financial advice firms myself, but from what I've heard, most of the smaller ones are already doing everything. It's more about, and this has been said so much by so many people, so I probably don't even need to say it again, but it's about evidencing value for consumers. So rather than just saying, yes, I provide value, how can you evidence that? But it's also about, I think, especially for some of the larger firms, especially providers, it's more about making their communications understandable. Yeah. Not that I want to go down this rabbit hole right now, but there's so much jargon in financial services. And I came from utilities and I thought that was bad until I came into financial services. And again, I think especially for financial advice, because I used to work for a pensions only brand and we always used to say like, oh, jargons. We even had like a jargon buster section of our site to like help decode certain pensions language. But when it comes to financial advice, there's pensions and then there's also investments and also insurance in so many different areas that all these different subsections have their own jargon, which then gets pulled into how financial advisors speak. Yeah. And it's a difficult one because it's just decades of history.
Yeah.
that you have to sort of unpick and say, well, what does that acronym actually mean? Because I know a lot of financial advisors, or certainly people who work in financial services, don't know what all the acronyms mean.
Mm-hmm. They just use them.
I've definitely been guilty of using an acronym in the wrong way in an article, or just saying the wrong thing.
At least we don't have to think about LTA now. It's gone.
Well, yes. Although I think some people are scared that Labour's going to bring it back.
Oh, no.
Not so much that it would be bad to bring it back, but just that it would create a headache.
If Labour were to bring it back, it wouldn't be for a while.
True. And they also haven't mentioned that they'll bring it back.
Yeah.
So.
They have been keeping their little cards very close to the chest.
They did do a whole paper on financial planning, though.
Okay.
And I was speaking to, I don't know if our listeners know, but probably most people do know Stephen Cameron from Aegon, pensions expert. He's the one that I based my pensions poker cover on, if anyone remembers that.
It was a great cover.
Great image. And he says, so advisors fear the LTA being introduced if Labour gets into power, but there's nothing to suggest this in Labour's plan for financial services. But what they do plan to do, apparently, according to this document, which I haven't read in detail yet, but I believe Stephen has, is review the pensions landscape as it's developed since 2000. So 24 years of development of pensions and bringing in all those acronyms and things. Okay. And considering whether it supports sustainable retirement incomes and the best possible investment returns. And he says he feels that sounds pretty far-reaching. So that would be a big piece of work. I mean, we're all just sort of hypothesizing here. I think they probably will get in, but I don't know. I'm not a political expert.
I mean, if we were to hedge our bets on past local, like smaller elections that have happened, we could say that is kind of a safe bet.
Did you know? So the local elections were fairly recently. So I don't know how much I should divulge. Technically, I'm still registered at my parents' address in Tunbridge Wells, so that's where I vote. Tunbridge Wells has been, in local and general elections, has been staunch Conservative since about 1975. And I believe in the local elections, the Lib Dems won.
Same in my area. Same in my area. The same thing happened last year. I was so surprised. First of all, I was surprised when I started seeing, like Lib Dem signs and even Labour ones, because my area is very conservative and it's always been as long as I've lived there. And then when Lib Dems won, I was like, what? That's...
I know. My dad told me and I was like, wow, first time in either of our lifetimes.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't know what they're doing.
Probably will happen. And then if Labour gets into power, they might look at the entire pensions landscape, which would be fascinating.
Yeah. And moving on to pensions and focusing a little bit more on that, let's talk about this dashboard.
Oh, yes.
You said 2026 to me earlier, and I was like,
Well, that's when they're hoping that it's going to come online, I think.
Yeah, but
we're in 2024 already, and in my head, we're still in about 2019. So
yeah. And also, I think when I first started hearing about it, I think they said at the time, which was like when I first started working for the brand that I worked for. So maybe 2016, 2017 is when I first heard about it. And then it was meant to be like put in place maybe 2019, something like that. And it just kept being pushed further and further back. And then it was like we'd get one, I think at the time, Ros Altman was the pensions minister. And then it changed to Steve Webb. And it still felt like they were just pushing to the next for like, oh no, they'll sort it out. Or
yeah. I think it was originally supposed to come in before either of us joined money marketing, definitely. It just reminds me so much of, so I mentioned I used to work for a utilities brand.
Yeah.
When I was on that, there was this thing called the smart meter rollout.
Yeah.
I think most people will have heard of smart meters because they're probably constantly offered them.
Yeah.
And it happened in 2 stages, and it was supposed to be, I can't even remember the exact years, but it was something like it was supposed to be complete in 2015. And it was still going on when I left that utilities brand in 2019. 2019.
Yeah.
It still hadn't got to the stage it was supposed to be in about 2015. And it just reminds me so much of that. There's these sort of big government-led initiatives.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's to do with how politicized it is, the fact maybe, I don't know if this is a bit unfair, but as you said, maybe pushing it to the next person to make it their problem.
Mm-hmm. I think logistically, it didn't make sense, the time frame they gave initially, because like now that I've thought about it and had to personally move my own pensions into one pot. But that was because luckily my mum was very adamant. I keep all my letters, all my papers. So every job that I ever had, even my part-time jobs where I was like on an auto-enrolled pension scheme, I kept those letters. So I had the number that I needed to transfer over to one pot. And I know that's not the same for a lot of people. A lot of people have had way more jobs than I have had to kind of try and get everything in one place. So just the amount of time that it took me to be able to do all that was quite difficult. But I can't imagine having people putting some random person from, I don't know, the Midlands who's been working for 30 years and doesn't really remember, you know, where like they worked, and some companies might have shut down at some point.
Yeah. Or changed their providers, or
and
the
changed
pension
their
provider
name.
might have gone into administration.
Or they've been consolidated into another company. These are all factors where it's like, how? I can imagine maybe they can roll out for like, oh, if you work in the NHS, we'll be able to do like a dashboard thing for you. And then if you were in work in the last 15 years, maybe it's easier for us because most of that stuff is online. But if your pension schemes might not have been online at the time, then you might have a bit more of a difficulty.
Yeah. It's a really, I mean, I don't envy them that job of trying to bring together pensions dashboards.
I mean, it's a great idea because, like I said, once, like, it was really nice being able to put all my different pots in one place and be able to see them.
I did the same.
Yeah, it just makes it a lot more concise, apart from the one pot that I have in South Korea, but I don't like to talk about it because it makes me sad.
One day you might get it back.
Yeah, but I'd have to go back to Korea when I'm 65 and be like, give me my... I'd be like, you have not been here in like, wait,
who are you?
Know? You haven't been here in like 35 years. And I'll be like, yeah, I want my money. But yeah, maybe something will change with that as well. Who knows?
But you can't, the government said that you won't be able to transact on the pensions dashboards, at least not at first. So you can see all your pensions, but if you want to consolidate them or put them into a completely separate pension pot, you have to do it via those providers. You can't do it via the pensions dashboard. And I can kind of see it, because I mean, I think if they tried to put transactions on the pensions dashboards at the same time, it would just take even longer.
Forever.
But at the same time, yes, it's going to be helpful to be able to see all your pensions in one place. But I know I'd get a bit irritated if it wasn't then very easy to go and transfer them into one pot, or I'd just give up. If I can't do something in a few clicks, I'm just like,
God,
no.
Okay. Yeah, I think I am the same way as well, but I think that's also a testament of the times. We're just so used to instant gratification. Everything now, a few simple clicks, and it's just, yeah, it's really difficult to get through. But I think that's enough of the serious stuff.
Yay.
So I thought we could talk about sci-fi and finance.
Some of my favorite topics.
And just looking ahead to the year 2040. How old will I be then? That's maths in my head. I don't know. I'll be old.
16 years older?
Huh?
16 years older?
Yeah, so I'll be older. I'll be more mature, hopefully. I'll have more money.
I'll be 49.
Okay, yeah. So we'll be 49 because we're the same age. And yeah, I'd like to think that I'll be in a better position financially at that point. But where do you see financial planning being in 2040 after all the stuff that we've just covered about where we are now?
Well, 2040 isn't actually that long into the future.
No, it's
I'd
not.
rather look at like 3100 or something. But let's do 2040.
We want to think of a time frame that we're still alive.
How do you know I won't be alive in 3100?
I just don't know if I want to be. So I didn't think you'd want to be.
Anyway, so I've just been writing this feature for the June magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So it won't be out when this podcast drops, but look out for it in June.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about in-person financial advice,
right? And
whether that's going to survive in the future,
mm-hmm.
or whether we're all going to switch to video calls.
Yeah.
So it's not like robo advice
mm-hmm.
versus financial advice.
It's just in person versus virtual.
As in like we are now
mm-hmm.
versus Teams, Zoom,
mm-hmm.
etc. Which I suppose is technically face-to-face advice as well, but
mm-hmm.
just delivered differently. The vast majority of advisors I spoke to, because I spoke to a lot for this feature, believe that there is always going to be a place for meeting face-to-face in person. Or, well, I say always, I mean, that's a long time in the future. Certainly over the next 20 to 30 years. Because a lot of them, so they have clients of different ages. And it's not just the younger ones who want to meet on video call and the older ones who want to meet in person. Quite often it's the younger ones who want to meet in person. Because I think since lockdown, and we've all just been traumatized by not being able to meet in person. So that means even as the next generation comes through, I think, well, I and these advisors, most of them believe that there is going to be a place for in-person advice further in the future. So in 2040, I think, obviously regulation is going to evolve. There might be all these changes to pensions, etc. I don't know the extent to which it's going to change that much in the next 16 years. Maybe artificial intelligence.
I think that's probably going to be playing a big because it keeps evolving and changing in a way that is a little scary. Like, this isn't advice, and I don't know how this would relate, but I saw like a TikTok account that does like AI Harry Potter. He's like making grime music, so different characters from Harry Potter, but like they're rapping, and he's used AI to create the music and the sound, like the voice of Harry Potter, and also like the visual is also AI. So all of that is just an AI.
Okay, I need to see
music thing, right?
How have I not heard of it?
I will send it to you, but I'm saying, like, if that is where we're at now, and there's going to be a point where AI becomes not sentient, but is able to, because right now it kind of needs us to prompt it and correct it.
It's more just sort of machine learning.
Mm-hmm. But there'll be a point where it's learning at the same rate that we learn, rather than being corrected and being like, no, that's wrong. This is
and you won't have to put in, because I've obviously, when ChatGPT came, was it beginning of last year now that it was all the big...
Yeah, it was quite a big hype, yeah.
And when I was playing about with it, you have to put in very specific prompts if you want a good answer. And I think you still do. Although I have noticed that OpenAI, rather, has just launched its latest iteration of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Which I read on the train this morning, is much, much better, like much more advanced than the last one.
But again, that's behind a paywall, which is funny because the CEO was like very staunchly like, this should be free for everyone. And then he was like, I need to please my shareholders.
And he wants his bonus.
Yeah. But I do think that, AI, but not the current form of AI, will have a large impact on not just financial services, but probably society in general. Yeah. I can see it having a big impact on investments if you're able to help like investment managers look at their portfolios in a much faster way. Maybe even advisors will be able to look at their clients' portfolios, and maybe AI will be able to prompt and be like, hey, we need to do a check-in with this client. They're at risk for this happening now that this has happened. That I can see a future in which all of that happens.
And I don't think that's that far in the future. So I don't think 2040 is at all unreasonable to think that's going to be established then.
Wow.
Further in the future, maybe it'll start actually offering advice. But if that happened, that would be pretty scary.
And what happens if we have flying cars? How do you think that will affect
financial advice?
Yeah. Or just like protection.
Well, actually.
Protection.
Oh. Well.
I just thought I'd end on a really silly, goofy note.
In terms of financial advice, it might affect financial advice and actually make it easier to have in-person meetings because you can just fly directly there.
That's true.
Way quicker than on roads.
And teleportation.
In theory. Although there'll be a lot more stuff in the air, so it might be a bit harder.
Yeah.
I just have like...
And then how would you do income protection? Not income protection, but like just protection and all.
Critical illness. Or the one with, if you're going to get in... Yeah, critical illness does cover life-threatening injuries.
Yeah.
So I think that would make it a lot harder because if you've got flying cars, then you're much more likely to get injured. Unless the cars are... I don't know, are we talking like cars like they are now that fly or actually...
I don't know. I'm trying to think of like, I'm surprised that we've got to this point and so far all we have are electric cars. Like no one's tried to think about creating...
No, there are autonomous vehicles.
There are.
That crash often.
Is that, if you have an autonomous car, is your insurance different for that? I
would imagine so. And I don't think very many people do have autonomous vehicles.
And then the protection, in terms of like your protection, do you have to declare, oh, I have an autonomous vehicle that I let
I think it's probably,
drive me up the M4?
Some kind of thing like, you have to declare whether you commute for work or whether you just have your car for leisure. There's probably like, also my car drives itself, by the way. So I'm not liable if it crashes. But then you are, because you are still in charge of the vehicle. So
I wonder if like financial advisors, the ones who do like intergenerational planning, I wonder if they think of all possible outcomes for their clients, but then also if they want to like stay with their clients' children and stuff like that. How they manage that. I don't know how I got from flying cars to this.
I think it probably depends on the age of the advisor.
Yeah.
If they're the age of their clients who are just approaching retirement.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Because I think thinking about life in 2040 and what my life will be like when I'm 49 is probably very different from my parents' life. I think there's a real possibility that
I won't have a 5-bedroom house for one.
Yeah. I don't know where in the world I'll be. But I probably might have a kid. But I don't think that I will have as many assets as my parents do, which is just so, And I don't want to think about like, I'll just be waiting for them to kick the bucket so I can
inherit. I never think like that. I'm not even considering inheritance as anything to do with my money.
But like getting an advisor and thinking about all of those things, I think is very important, but it just feels like my reality in 2040 will be a lot different from the reality of other people now.
Yeah, definitely.
Who are older than me in 2040. But I'm excited. Hopefully aliens invade and...
I was going to say, and what about space travel? We might all live on Mars. That would be depressing. No greenery there.
I just don't see the point of going to Mars.
I would go there. I just wouldn't live there.
There's also like certain parts of the world we haven't yet explored. So why are we going all the way to Mars? I don't know.
In case we need to abandon ship or planet.
I'm very much we tried, we failed, let's just give up.
And I'm very much, I will live at all costs.
No, okay. I think I've watched one too many sci-fi films where I'm like, I'm not fighting with some rebels for bread, no. I like comfort.
And this is where we're opposite.
Yeah. If I can't have comfort, I'm just going to be like, I had a good run. But on that note, I think we should wrap it up.
We're going down a rabbit hole and Tom isn't here to control us.
I know. I managed to pull us back. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for this. And I hope we can do this maybe on a monthly basis where we just kind of riff on
I think that would be a great idea.
things we find interesting within financial advice.
Lots to say.
It's a lot to say. A lot of questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe leave a comment and tell us your thoughts. But be nice.
You don't have to be nice.
Be nice to me. You don't have to
Be horrible to me.
Lois likes that. I like praise. But yeah. Thank you so much for watching. And Lois, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.